conflict in Ukraine is now almost 100 days old, and some analysts had feared it now appears to be developing into a long-term war of attrition. Kiev is refusing to give up territory as part of any peace deal with Moscow, so how are military strategies changing, and what lies ahead for both sides? Well, Dr. Zeno Leoni is a lecturer in defence studies at King's College London. Dr. Leoni, thanks very much indeed for joining us. We're seeing now this savage attack on the city of Severodonetsk. What can we make of that? Is that confirmation that the strategy, the Russian strategy, has completely changed?
I don't think so. I think the Russian strategy has changed in late April when the second phase of this campaign started. And now Russia is not focusing anymore on three fronts, north, south, and east of Ukraine, but is only mostly focusing on the Donbas and on a part of it. And Severodonetsk is a very important moment because it's one of the biggest cities in that central spot of Donbas. After that, the last bastion for Ukraine defense will be Kramatorsk, another major town in the area.
So the Russians have to do two things. They have to take this ground, which now they are managing to do with sheer force of firepower. But then, of course, they have to keep this ground. And what are they going to do once they occupy Severodonetsk and when they occupy these other cities? Can they turn that into a political occupation, or will they just sustain a military occupation for the rest of this year?
I think they are in a rush. We've seen that in other parts of Ukraine, for example, in the south. They are in a rush to turn those territory, to bring them under their more or less direct administration. And then it will depend on how fierce is the counteroffensive from Ukraine. It depends on that, whether Russia will manage to have that political control or not. It will depend on Ukrainian counteroffensive.
Do you think the Ukrainians have the ability to counterattack now? I mean, we saw in the north of the country that they took advantage of the chaotic Russian strategy to hit various vulnerable points of the Russian advance. But this time now, in the open ground, it's not proving as effective. Can they mount any kind of counteroffensive?
Yes. So as I was about to say, I think if we look at the evidence in the previous weeks of this conflict, it tells us that the Ukrainians can fend off Russian attacks and they can do minor tactical gains, counteroffensive. We haven't had any evidence of any major counterattack, so we don't know about that. And anyway, the Ukrainian strategy over the next few weeks will be one of trying to slow down Russian troops advancing in eastern Ukraine, while Zelensky tries to negotiate a delivery of more weapons as fast as possible. That's their short-term strategy.
Very briefly, Dr. Leoni, what's the timeline on this? Do you think this battle of attrition will continue right through the rest of this year?
Well, that's quite far in time. I certainly think that if Russia continues to succeed, as we've seen in recent weeks, but at this very slow pace, it might take another 1 to 2 months before Russia reaches the border of Donbas and conquer the whole of that chunk of eastern Ukraine.
Dr. Zeno Leoni, thanks very much indeed for joining us today this afternoon.